Another shiny, bright new week, several more discussion topics to pique your interest, a whole new conversation. Welcome back to 360 Speedway. A very warm welcome back to 360 HQ for a fresh new episode 18 to be precise, of enjoyable Speedway discussion. That's certainly the aim, as it is week on week. Settle yourselves down, make yourselves comfortable. Let's begin. I'm going to begin first of all with a bit of an announcement, just to back up our Facebook post from earlier this week. 360 Speedway is going on holiday. Yay! At least taking a short break next week. So there will be a 2-week gap. Now, the next episode 19, is scheduled to be published in 2 weeks' time. That's Friday the 29th of August. So perhaps a chance for you to catch up, if you need to, on some of our many back episodes. Check out our YouTube channel for the previous 17 episodes worth of Speedway chat. Okay, back on course. Episode 18, let's start as we typically do by introducing this week's lineup. We hope you enjoyed last week, incidentally. We have had to separate Big Mac and Krabby. They've been given red cards and they've been rested this week to let them cool off. And if you believe that, you believe anything. They're very good friends. But Andy Meredith and I did enjoy sitting back and watching them do battle last week on that standardisation debate. If you haven't watched it, please make a point of looking that up. All right, let's crack on then. So we've managed to restore our interview feature this week. We'll come to that just shortly. But the lineup this week, welcoming back into the 360 hot seat once again, on the back of a very successful, from a personal perspective at least, Northern Tour of Edinburgh and Berwick over the weekend. The smiling, still counting his pennies, Simon Lambert. Hello, Simon. Welcome back.
Evening, Derek. Evening, all.
And also stepping back into the 360 hot seat, another familiar face, another man with some big opinions to share. The rinky-dink panther, as I like to call him. Carl Johnson, welcome back to you.
Evening, Derek. Evening, everyone.
Okay, let's crack on then. So, as I've mentioned, we've reintroduced our interview feature this week. Hope you've enjoyed previous chats with Ben Barker, Leon Flint, Chris Morton, Hans Nielsen have been on. And we're going to keep on the superlatives tonight and talk to another very talented young Speedway rider. A young man who enjoys saying hello to when he comes and visits Glasgow a couple of times a season. The ever-smiling Jason Edwards. Good evening to you, Jason. How are you?
How are we all? Yeah, no, it's good to be on, to be honest.
Jason, listen, first of all, thank you. I just want to publicly say thank you for being so good about lining up this interview. You went out of your way to make this happen for me, so thank you very much, Jason. Jason, listen, I'm going to ask you to look back to what was a superb television feast last week. For those of us who weren't at the National Speedway Stadium, table-topping Ipswich travelled along to tackle the host club, the Aces. A top of the table clash was the billing, and it absolutely lived up to it. It was a television Speedway spectacular. It must have been superb to be very much part of it, Jason.
Oh, just to be there in real life. Well, it started off obviously with the British final, being able to be there in real life and actually watching the final. Do you know what I mean? The problem with those telemeetings is you end up watching on their little screen, and especially when it's Heat 15s and your super heats and so on, some of the racing that Brady and Dan can pull off, you have to see it with your own eyes.
So Jason, to get into the business end of the season, Ipswich are very much featuring in the cut and thrust of the playoffs. That you're sitting proudly on top of the Premiership. You must be drinking in and consuming lots of knowledge, lots of experience, just by being surrounded by your Ipswich teammates, Jason.
Yeah, the whole Ipswich thing's been it's been brilliant so far, to be honest. How long it goes on, obviously I'm only on a 28-day contract at the moment, so it's kind of just been picked as much of the brains as I possibly can, and it's funny because I've been in quite a few top league clubs now, and there aren't many that are teams. And going into Ipswich, and I know it sounds really stupid, everyone actually talks and discusses everything. And I know Simon can relate to this probably, but it feels a lot more like a championship team in the top league, just with obviously better riders basically. So it's just been brilliant to pick their brains. And I feel I've been able to put a lot of that itch into, not necessarily at Ipswich, but a lot of it into my racing at Redcar.
When you're on a 28-day arrangement, Jason, do you feel, it's maybe a silly question to ask, but does that add any pressure to you because you feel that you've kind of got to performance almost right from the off?
So far, obviously I did have a brilliant meeting on Thursday night, but other than that, it's just been, I've seen it more as an opportunity to try and put my foot in the door, if that makes sense. Like if I don't perform and don't do anything, well, I don't lose anything. Do you know what I mean? But I've got everything to gain out of it. So that's the way I've looked at it. And a lot of people have said, "Oh, what's the plan? Are you staying? Are you not?" And I said, it's not up to me. It's obviously up to Chris and Richie to decide what they want to do going forward. But all I can do is make their decision as hard as possible, and that's all I've really tried to look at with it. And at the same time, it's been nice because it's been an opportunity to kind of take the time a little bit and try and work things out.
You know, Jason, you're in that rising star berth, right? It's so-called, which suggests that, you know, in some shape or form, the rising star riders ought to be, they have some protection, right? They should be insulated and allowed to develop and all that good stuff. But you have, I hope you don't mind me mentioning it, but you have been bounced around a little bit in the Premiership. I mean, can you benefit as a rider from being bounced around a little bit, or could it quite easily work against you, Jason, confidence-wise?
I've said it to quite a few people before, and I see a lot of value in staying at the same club for a number of years, and I think everyone benefits out of it, not just the rider, the club, the sponsors, everyone. So, like I say, if you said to me, "Oh, you can be at Ipswich, but you'll be there for the next 4 years," I would take that over being at 4 different clubs, because I think one, you get settled in, but you're also able to learn a lot more and actually crack on with the same track. You know your surroundings, and I think the best way to look at it is look at people's averages. If you tend to stay at the same club for a number of years, your average should improve year on year at the same club, where at the start of the year at a new track, you're kind of taking 3 steps back to start the year. And obviously some people do see it as a new opportunity with it, but normally that's only when you're falling out of the club or not gone very well for them. So I think you only got to look at examples like Drew this year. It's the first year he's been at the same club back to back, and he's really benefited from it. So that's the way I look at it anyway. I know a lot of people might have different views on it, but I just think a bit of continuity is quite a good thing.
No, I mean, it's pleasing to hear you say that, Jason. And, you know, back in the day, riders used to remain with clubs a little bit longer term on average than they tend to do today. You know, I can't liken it, you know, I've never ridden a speedway bike, right? But I can liken it to having a day job in the normal world, right? Where, you know, everyone needs a few weeks, a couple of months to settle into the surroundings, the way that a particular organisation, or in your case, a speedway club would operate, to get used to the track, all that sort of stuff. And it really does seem quite cutthroat that, you know, I understand that it's a results-based business, and speedway clubs will be judged by their fans, at least, by success on the track. But, you know, from a rider's perspective, you know, it really does seem overly cutthroat at times.
Yeah, and that's it. And I just think you should be able to go, say, for instance, you say Redcar, you say Charles Wright, you say Bellevue, you say Dan Bewley, and so on, because if you keep bouncing everyone, suddenly the club doesn't really mean anything, I don't think, because you've not got that same people there ever. But that's where as good as the averages are, when the averages stop people being somewhere by 0.1 of an average, you end up thinking, is that really the good of the sport sometimes? Do you know what I mean?
What's the mood in the Ipswich camp, Jason, right? Because, like I mentioned, we're closing in on the playoffs. Ipswich are very obviously going to feature in it. Hopefully you guys will finish top and have, well, I was going to say have a pick. I don't think you have a pick. I think you automatically line up against the fourth place finishers. But you must be fairly uber confident as a team, as a unit, because home and away, the Witches typically, I'm not even sure the Witches have lost any aggregate bonus points this season, which suggests that they're very effective home and away.
Yeah, well, like I say, all I've looked at in my way is I've done more meetings now than what I would have if I'd have gone back to Birmingham. with that whole situation. So I haven't lost anything from doing it. And no, like I say, Ipswich-wise, obviously, it's just a solid team from 1 to 7. Especially when someone like Dan Thompson at number 6 is banging out 8, 9, 10 points every meeting, it does make it a very hard team to beat. So no, like I say, they can do their bit, and as long as I can chip in a few points and put some points on the board, I'll be happy both ways.
Absolutely. Let's talk championship. You've mentioned Redcar already, and that's a different equation for you, Jason, because you have been a settled rider at Redcar for quite a few seasons now. Does it feel much more at home, to describe it that way?
Yeah, that's it. And like I say, you rock up, you know what's going on, through the winter, you know everything. And like I say, there obviously is a point where you get too comfortable at somewhere. But like I say, I don't feel like I'm at that point with it. And like I say, that's what's been nice for me, is every year, obviously I started number 7, and every year I just got a little bit better. Yeah, I haven't jumped up to number 1 or 5 or, do you know what I mean, beat any superstars. But the main thing is I've been steady and consistently building. So for me, that's been a bigger thing than anything. And obviously, with the injury to Eric's been really hard. Obviously, we're past the deadline day now as well. So it's just really guests and RR for the rest of the year.
Yeah. Jason, I bumped into Roy Clark at Glasgow a couple of weeks ago, and within seconds, we were both I was trying to impersonate Roy, doing the introduction that he does for you, where he calls you the Billy Ricky Blaster, or something like that. That's not a bad impersonation of Roy Clark, but can you say Billy Ricky Blaster like Roy Clark does, Jason?
No, I sound a bit too posh saying it. It's the same as Brian, who helps me at Redcar and all the Northern meetings. And I said to him the first time we went up this year, 'cause once you've done the winter down south and then you've gone back up north again, suddenly you catch on to all the little sayings and the slang. And then he says a few things now, and I go, see, if that was the winter, I'd just start laughing at you. But now, obviously, it's normal again.
Listen, you mentioned the Bears, and I guess my word's not yours, but a kind of backs to the wall job because of Eric's ongoing absence. And I hope you don't mind me mentioning it, but I'm smirking as I say it. Glasgow turned you over a couple of weeks back, and maybe that was a little bit of a shock to the system. Certainly didn't do you any favours as the Bears push for a top 4 finish. But right here, right now, I think the Bears are sitting in 4th spot, Jason. So the fixtures are beginning to run out, but we're going to talk about the guys and I are going to talk about the Premiership and the Championship a little bit later on. But I'm going to reveal right now that I'm going to predict that Bears are going to sneak into the top 4 and feature in those playoffs. What's your thoughts, so, Jason?
Yeah, I hope so, because obviously we want a busy September and October. Obviously, we've still got the Knockout Cup and BSN meetings to put in, which I always never quite understand when we seem to have like a 6-7 week break in the middle of the year. This year I wasn't complaining too much because I was out for 4 weeks, but like I say, it just seems funny when you have a big break to do that. But no, it was a big thing for us to beat Oxford home, obviously home and away, and get the aggregate point, because we've got meetings in hand, but it's very tight for that 4th spot. So that's what we want. And not really too much more to say other than we want to be in the playoffs like every other team.
I sometimes liken Redcar and Glasgow as being similar clubs, and what I mean by that is typically Redcar and Glasgow don't very often hammer sides at home because the circuits, I think, are reasonably fair, and visiting riders tend to enjoy racing there. But equally they're quite formidable away from home. No one's going to steamroller Glasgow or Redcar away from home. So I see both teams actually as being relatively close. I think Glasgow and Edinburgh have got. I think we've got a BSN semi-final date at some point to come in September. I think it might be, Jason. So we're going to see a bit of you back at Ashfield again before the season's out. And your last couple of appearances, if you don't mind me asking about your form around Glasgow, have impressed me. You might not think that's much to impress Derek at Glasgow, but you put in some real storming rides around. I can picture in my mind's eye right now Jason blasting outside line 3rd and 4th turns at Glasgow and sweeping past some Glasgow riders, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I know Simon will be the same. I don't know actually. I always, whenever Glasgow's on it, I always look forward to going to Glasgow. And I've said it to everyone loads of times before. If only Glasgow was a bit more south, you'd ride there every week. You know what I mean? Because it's just, you walk the track and you go onto the coming out the second bend. You just look how wide it is and everything. And obviously Andy Meredith and the team there are doing a brilliant job every week. And yeah, and that's what I do related to Redcar. You turn up somewhere and you think, I want to ride and bike. Do you know what I mean? It's not like sometimes when you turn up at Edinburgh and you think, flipping heck, this is tight. Do you know what I mean? And you think, oh God, how are we going to get on? So, like I say, I always look forward to going to Glasgow. And like I say, I did a guest booking there at the start of the year with Paul. Obviously, Redcar being there, and yeah, hopefully we get a few more goes there because, like I say, it's a good track to go to.
Well, whenever I talk to you, Jason, I hope you don't mind me asking you this out loud on an interview, but whenever I talk to you in person on an interview, because I've done a couple of interviews with you now over some time, but you always have a great attitude to Speedway. You know, you never seem down in the dumps about it, when perhaps sometimes you might have reason to be a little bit down in the dumps about it. But I really like your approach. I like your attitude. Probably generally to life, Jason. Does that surprise you to hear me say that about you, or are you quite a kind of upbeat young man anyway, generally?
No, like the attitude towards Speedways, I always get annoyed with a lot of people when they're miserable about it and moaning this and that, because I just think we just don't do it. Do you know what I mean? I just think the way Speedway is, you have to be absolutely 100% into it and wanting to do it, because otherwise you're never going to get the best out of it. Do you know what I mean? And there's too much risk and there's too much cost to go and be doing it, to kind of half do it all the time. And I see that with a lot of things. It's like when I look at a lot of people that just work a normal 9 to 5 and they clock in at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and when the buzzer goes at 5 o'clock, whatever, they're first out the door. And to me, I just think there's more to life with it all, and you get out what you put in all the time. So yeah, like I say, there might not everyone's like that, but I just find a lot of people a bit miserable sometimes, and they could do just putting a bit of a positive spin on it sometimes.
100%, Jason, 100%. You're living the dream. Carol, Simon, any questions you've always wanted to ask Jason Edwards?
He's so quick at the starts.
Well, sometimes it can be good and sometimes it can be bad. And it's funny because we were at Oxford on Wednesday, and I thought, my starts have been all right. And then I went next to Sam Masters, and I came in and I just said, how the hell does he do starts like that? Do you know what I mean? And that's what it's talking about starts. Jody Scott always goes on to me. He goes, my starts in the National League have been brilliant, and I've come to Championship and I just can't get out the start. And I said, it's not that you're worse out the start, it's just the competition you're against all the time. And like I say, it just gets harder and harder the more levels you go up, doesn't it, all the time, as you know.
It must be a super frustrating sport, Jason. You know, if I spoke to a professional golfer, I'm sure they would tell me that golf is the most frustrating sport in the world, or whatever, you know, darts, or whatever it might be. But Speedway must be right up there, because there are so many variables, and just when you think you've cracked it, the next night, you realise that you haven't at all.
Yeah, and the other frustrating thing I always think, and I know we briefly mentioned it before, was that we don't actually know what's going on next year. And the fact we're in August, and that's where I say about being in the same club multiple years in a row. It'd be nice to be planned, right, this is where we are next year, this is the club, and so on, because, well, it is a job, and, if you don't know where you are next year in a couple of months' time, you could be out of a job.
Yeah. Jason, listen, I'm going to let you go because I promised that I would. I know you've got other things to attend to tonight, but listen, Jason, it's going to be a busy, hectic, dramatic end to the season. You're very much in the thick of things with Redcar and Ipswich respectively, and very publicly, I don't mind at all wishing you the very best of luck, Jason. Good luck for the rest of the season. Thanks for making time to speak to us on 360 Speedway.
No, thank you very much. And if I can stay longer one night, I'll happily, we can always do the full show one night, can't we?
We'll get you to pop back on, Jason. We'll hold you to that. Thanks very much, Jason Edwards.
No, brilliant. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Cheers, bye-bye.